Alexander the Great, or Mr. the Great, as we like to call him, because he's no longer head of state, was responsible for war crimes for the destruction of the city of Persepolis about 2,400 years ago. And the central issue, of course, was whether the standards of today on war crimes apply to things that happened.
War brings chaos, but some acts go beyond imaginable cruelty. These shocking war crimes expose the darkest sides of humanity, leaving scars that never heal. Prepare to uncover the most horrifying, heart-stopping events in history that still haunt us today. The rape of Nanking was a brutal event that happened during the Second Sino-Japanese War. In 1937, Japanese soldiers invaded the Chinese city of Nanking, which was the capital of China at the time. For about 6 weeks, from December 1937 to January 1938, they carried out terrible acts of violence against the people living there. The soldiers killed between 200,000 and 300,000 people, mostly civilians. They also raped tens of thousands of women, many of whom were murdered afterward. The soldiers tortured and killed people in cruel ways, such as using civilians for bayonet practice or decapitating them. These actions caused terrible pain and suffering for the survivors. The city was destroyed. Homes and buildings were set on fire and looted. The people of Nanking lived in constant fear. This event is considered one of the worst war crimes in history. Today, the rape of Nanking is remembered as a dark chapter in history. It serves as a reminder of the terrible consequences of war. The memory of the victims continues to affect China and Japan, as the event is still a sensitive subject between the two countries. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great faced one of his toughest battles, the Siege of Tyre. Tyre was a powerful city located on an island. It had strong walls and a history of defending itself against many enemies, including the Assyrians and Babylonians. But Alexander was determined to capture it. To attack the island, Alexander's engineers built a causeway made of stones and wood. This was a difficult task. The Tyrians fought back with fire ships and arrows, trying to stop the Macedonian army. Despite these attacks, Alexander continued to build the causeway. He made it wider and stronger and brought ships from his allies to help with the siege. Over time, the Macedonian forces got closer. After 7 months of fighting, Alexander's army finally broke through Tyre's walls. The results were brutal. They killed 6,000 Tyrians. About 2,000 others were crucified along the shore to scare others. Around 30,000 women and children were sold into slavery. It was a shocking display of power. The siege left a lasting impact. The causeway Alexander built connected the island to the mainland. This battle showed Alexander's military genius and his ruthless determination in war. The sack of Carthage in 146 BCE ended the Third Punic War. After years of rivalry, Rome decided to destroy Carthage once and for all. When Carthage refused to surrender, Rome laid siege to the city. For 3 years, the Roman army, led by Scipio Aemilianus, surrounded Carthage. They cut off supplies and built blockades. Finally, the Romans attacked. The final battle lasted 6 days. Over 100,000 civilians were killed, and around 50,000 women and children were enslaved. The city was then set on fire and destroyed. Witnesses like historians Polybius and Appian described the destruction as methodical and cruel. Some say the Romans sowed salt into the ground to ensure nothing would grow again, though this may be an exaggeration. The fall of Carthage showed Rome's power, sending a message to all other civilizations. After the sack, the land became a Roman province known as Africa. The brutal destruction of Carthage highlights the lengths Rome would go to ensure its dominance. The Hamidian massacres took place between 1894 and 1896 under the rule of Sultan Abdul Hamid II in the Ottoman Empire. These attacks primarily targeted Armenians who were seen as a threat to the Ottoman government. In 1894, the first massacre occurred when Armenians in the Sassoon region protested high taxes. The Ottoman soldiers, supported by Kurdish tribes, attacked, burning villages and killing thousands. Over the next 2 years, the violence spread to other regions, including Constantinople and Urfa. In Urfa, 3,000 Armenians were trapped in a church and burned alive. These massacres were not just about killing, they also aimed to suppress Armenian political movements and keep control over the empire. Armenians were forced to convert to Islam or flee to other countries. The number of people killed during these massacres is estimated to be between 80,000 and 300,000. The brutality of the Hamidian massacres left a lasting impact on the Armenian community and set the stage for the later Armenian genocide. The Ottoman Empire's actions showed its willingness to use violence to maintain power and control over its people. The Srebrenica massacre occurred during the Bosnian War in July 1995. Srebrenica, a UN-safe area, was overrun by Bosnian Serb forces led by General Ratko Mladic. Over 8,000 Muslim men and boys were killed in a few days. The Bosnian Serb army separated them from the women and executed them in mass killings. This massacre took place after the town had been declared a safe zone by the UN. Yet the peacekeepers were unable to prevent the attack. The bodies of the victims were buried in mass graves, many of which were later uncovered. The Srebrenica massacre shocked the world. It was a clear violation of international law and is considered the worst atrocity in Europe since World War II. Several of the leaders responsible for the massacre were later convicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. The massacre remains a tragic reminder of the dangers of ethnic conflict and the failure of international peacekeeping efforts. It continues to impact the region, with ongoing efforts to identify and honor the victims. The Mongols, led by Genghis Khan and his successors, were known for their extreme violence and innovative tactics during their conquests. One of their most infamous strategies was mass executions. In Nishapur, for example, historical accounts claim that around 1.7 million people were killed after the city resisted. Entire populations were wiped out in other regions to send a strong message of fear and control. The Mongols also used early forms of biological warfare. During the siege of Kaffa in 1346, their army, suffering from the plague, catapulted infected corpses over the city walls. This spread the deadly disease among the besieged population. Some historians believe this event contributed to the spread of the Black Death, which later devastated Europe and Asia. These tactics were not only brutal, but also highly effective. They helped the Mongols expand their empire quickly and intimidate any opposition. However, the human cost was staggering, and their actions caused immense suffering. The Mongols' approach to warfare changed history, leaving behind a legacy of both fear and innovation in military strategy. The Assyrian armies, active from the 10th to the 7th centuries BCE, were known for their extreme cruelty. Their empire, which spanned across Mesopotamia, used terror to maintain control. They were feared for their brutal methods, including flaying and impalement. Captured enemies were often skinned alive. The skins were then displayed on walls as a grim warning to others. Another method of torture was impalement, where victims were pierced with large stakes and left in public view. Entire cities were sometimes destroyed, with the people either killed or enslaved. Assyrians also used psychological warfare to spread fear. News of their cruelty spread quickly, causing many cities to surrender without a fight. This terror was meant to prevent resistance and keep their empire in control. However, their cruelty eventually led to their downfall. Over time, many enemies grew resentful. In 612 BCE, a coalition of Babylonians, Medes, and Scythians attacked Nineveh, the Assyrian capital. The city was destroyed, and the Assyrian Empire collapsed. The Assyrian legacy serves as a reminder of how fear can be used to maintain power. Their brutality left a dark mark on ancient history. The T4 euthanasia program was one of the darkest acts in Nazi Germany's history. From 1939 to 1941, the Nazis targeted disabled individuals, both physically and mentally. They were considered life unworthy of life. Under the guise of medical care, people were taken to special facilities. At these centers, victims were killed in gas chambers and their bodies were burned. False death certificates were issued to hide the truth from families. The T4 program marked the beginning of Nazi genocide and served as a model for the later Holocaust. The program's cruelty set the stage for even worse atrocities. It was a shocking example of how the Nazis treated vulnerable people. Many of the doctors and officials involved in T4 later played key roles in the mass murders of the Holocaust. In 1941, the program was officially halted due to public outcry. However, its legacy of violence and inhumanity would continue throughout the war. The T4 program showed how the Nazi regime's deadly ideology started small before growing into a broader campaign of terror. As always, thanks for joining. Like, subscribe, and comment for more of the History Crack.